Good morning, April. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Great. We'll get started.
Okay.
So, April McCartney, thank you so much for taking time this afternoon to talk with us about MTSS. And as you know, you teach another section of the class I'm teaching, which is on multi-tiered systems of support.
Yes.
So we'll get started. If you want to begin by introducing yourself and your position at your school and your role in MTSS at your school.
Okay, perfect. Well, my name is April McCartney. I am currently an assistant principal at a middle school. We actually opened up the middle school. It's our fifth year open. And so before that, I was an assistant principal at elementary, and I've also taught for 16 years at elementary school. So I have a lot of elementary background. Specifically at my middle school now, we had to create our MTSS system from scratch, building a new school. And in middle school, MTSS is not very popular. A lot of middle schools do not engage in these practices. So in elementary school, they come a lot more naturally to teachers as you are in joining the workforce in elementary. It's a natural process and system that you're going to be exposed to in an elementary school setting. And so we had to start from scratch and build momentum every single year. And it definitely isn't complete yet. We are just starting our tier two behavior side, our PBIS side at the school, even after being open for 4 years. And so it is a process in order to increase teacher buy-in and really make sure the practices are followed the way that they're supposed to be effective for students.
And April, something that stands out that you said is that you are focusing on the PBS side.
Hmm.
That is something that when we teach about MTSS, we teach about them happening together. But when I interviewed some other teachers, clearly that PBS side wasn't fully developed, or the teachers didn't really have a role in it at this point, because it was still evolving, like you said. But this will be helpful to talk with you more about that.
Yeah,
How
definitely.
What does an effective MTSS system look like school-wide?
So the it looks different in every school because you will have schools where you will have a lot of students that need behavior support that come from maybe different homes, and they need behaviors not being addressed at home, behaviors not being addressed previously at school. And so you may have a lot of behaviors. You may come from a school that has more students that are struggling. And so your RTI process could be heavy. I've been at schools where we have over 300 kids, right? A third of your school is below the 21st percentile on the maps, which means that you're supposed to meet with small groups so many times a week, provide intervention, and do weekly progress monitoring. And so, school wide, it really just needs to be collaborative. Everybody needs to be involved. It's really, really hard, which I'll talk about the tiers soon, but it's really going to look different at every single school. You just need to be prepared to see what small group instruction is going to be like your gold. Teachers need to know how to not only have effective tier one, but also have really good small group instruction in any of the tiers. And so that really is where new teachers need to start. But as a school, it's going to look different everywhere you go. So at my school, our MTSS, we meet with our RTI groups, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, and our sixth grade ELA and math teachers come together. And then our seventh grade ELA and math teachers come together to meet, and we just talk about academics. So we have a separate process for each one. But then for behavior, we bring in our science and social studies teachers, in addition to our math and ELA teachers, to start tracking student behavior for students who aren't responding to our tier one behavior management system. And so ours are separate because we want to have enough time to talk about kids. You need to have time to meet and talk about students and really look at the big picture. And so at every school, it's going to be different. But our teachers that are going through college right now, they're really just trying to figure out, you're really going to follow whatever your administrator is telling you need to do. So walking in as a new teacher, knowing that I need to progress monitor my students and I need to pull small group in every tier is what is going to put you ahead of everybody else. So that's really the key components to what our new teachers need to know walking into a school environment.
And you've shared this with me before. We've talked, and also the research shows small groups alone. I mean, certainly there's strategies to small groups
Mhm.
and time duration and clearly what content is covered, but just having students in small groups by themselves makes a lot of difference.
It
Um,
does. It definitely helps to support like diverse learners, right? Everybody learns differently. Everybody learns at a different pace. Everybody, um, you know, like keeps information in at different ways, retains information is what I'm trying to say. And so we need to be able to address that every kid is unique, and how we do that is through small groups.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to follow up on a couple things you said. So you meet with seventh, eighth, and ninth graders. I'm sorry, teachers, seventh, eighth, ninth grade teachers, ELA and math. And how often do those teams meet?
So we meet with it's sixth, seventh, and eighth. So we meet with sixth,
Oh,
seventh, and eighth.
yeah.
We meet with them right now 4 times a year. So we meet with them 2 times
Wow.
in the first semester, talk about kids, and then 2 times in the second semester. And it's kind of like a revolving, like every 6 to 8 weeks, we meet with teachers per each grade level. So we'll meet with the sixth grade teachers 1 week, and then the next week we'll meet with seventh grade. And remember, this is just looking at really we look at some behavior, but it's really just academics, attendance, grades, progress monitoring, and then any diagnostic assessment that we give. And so we're really looking at the whole picture of the child, but mostly focused on academics at that moment.
And the teams include the teachers in those grades, six, seven, eight, and you
Me?
as the facilitator and vice principal, assistant principal.
Uh-huh.
And who else? Would there be strategists or
Yep. So
tutors or anybody?
I have an RTI. She's not a strategist. She's just a teacher that we buy her prep to do RTI
Mm,
for do a lot of the spreadsheet stuff. So she leads the computer. I have a part-time strategist that actually leads the meeting. I facilitate. Our social worker is there, and then our grade level counselor is there because a lot of our next steps is involving parent contact. Like if parents are not being contacted, which is a huge deal. Like we need to be proactive in
mhm.
communicating with families about what's going on with their student, our concerns up front, how we want to help them. And so really our counselors help navigate those conversations if the teachers need support. And so those like or scheduling a parent teacher conference. Now in elementary school, you would just bring the teachers for every grade because they teach multiple grades. It would look a little bit different and you can meet
Right.
more often because actually, you can't meet more often because you have more grades. So you have double the amount of grades as we do. So at my elementary school, we went from 2 stars to 4 stars basically through our PLC and MTSS process at that school because it was very strong. But we met with the groups, we just rotated them. So every week we didn't do kindergarten until second semester because they're not considered far enough behind because they just started school. But every other grade level we met with, we were able to meet with ongoing. So we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we just kept meeting with them in rotation.
Okay. So they know when their meeting's coming up. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
consistent,
it's scheduled
the
on the
way you schedule
calendar.
it.
We master schedule it all on the calendar so they know it's coming up because they can't have any other meetings that day. So they can't
Okay.
have any IEP meetings. They can't hold any parent teacher conferences. Those are very much like our PLCs. Those are very sacred mornings, we call them, where we are having opportunities to meet together to talk about students. Just like for PLCs, we meet together to talk about planning, instruction, and assessment. So yeah.
I'd like to be a fly on the wall and listen to those conversations because I know the content is rich and you're really looking at data and, right. I mean, and getting opinions and
Mhm.
suggestions.
Yeah, yeah, they're definitely rich conversations when we look at, kids that are struggling. We look at a lot of things like where have they been all this time? Are they new to our school? Are
Right.
they transient? Do they have gaps in instruction, right? So as you know, going through like special education, one of those qualifying factors. Is there a need for service? But also, is attendance an issue? Are there gaps in instruction? If there's gaps in instruction, we are never, ever going to want to tell a family that they're eligible under a disability when they really haven't had the opportunity to get the instruction. So those are all factors that go into even an RTI or PBIS system, is looking at those environmental factors that we can't control and like considering them, but really looking at, okay, what can we control on our school campus to help the student be successful. So we look at all of that. We look at their attendance, their grades. We have attendance officers go out. We try and really just, like I said, look at the whole picture of the student.
That's great. Well, April, I do know your school is very strong in MTSS, and you also do training, I think, across the campus, or at least consulting with other
Yeah,
schools. So I'm really happy that you're teaching a section of this class, but also sharing your knowledge with us because you're out there.
thank you.
I'm not.
Yeah.
So let's see. The next guiding question, and you can take it anywhere you want. So, what are elements of tier one, tier two, and tier three that are important to have in place?
So, as I mentioned previously, small group instruction. So when we look at tier one is so crucial to, if our tier one instruction is not effective, what's going to happen? Our kids are going to be failing, and it's not because they don't know the content, it's because the alignment of our instruction to the standards, right? So having effective tier one instruction really gives us an idea of where our kids currently performing at, and that's when you give that diagnostic, it gives you a percentile. Are they below the 21st percentile? Those are the kids that we are specifically targeting within the RTI component. And so really looking at, is my instruction effective? And I'm not just talking about reading through a teacher's manual and following everything they're telling you like a robot. I'm saying, are we using good, effective teaching strategies where students are collaborating, where we are helping students do more thinking? Students are working harder than the teacher. And so really looking at what effective tier one instruction looks like. Then from there, we move on to small group. So we do tier one small group, which can be reteaching the concepts that you've already taught. So those tier one interventions, specifically for RTI, for the academic piece, is really about how am I reteaching and closing little gaps that I can close and I can control in a tier one setting, right? Where we are maybe reteaching different components and you're pulling groups. Like I have teachers who pull groups and just do grammar because kids need focused grammar. So every single one of their groups that day is the same small group and everybody is getting retaught on grammar or getting retaught on editing, writing, because that is a tier one activity that's happening, and we move to small group. So then when you look at tier two instruction, that's when those evidence-based practices come in. And I'm just talking about academics right now. So when your evidence-based practices come in, that's when you're looking at the diagnostic and trying to figure out like, where is the breakdown in this student's understanding of reading and writing concepts, math concepts? What do I need to do? Do I need to focus on getting kids to memorize math facts so that they can easily solve more complex problems? Do I need to focus on vocabulary? Do I need to focus on citing evidence? What do I need to do to start closing some of those gaps based on that data? So we always look at data and we align gaps to those tier two interventions. And then, of course, your progress monitoring every week to see how your interventions are working. Because if your interventions are not working, then we need to change them. Something's happening. We need to change them. We need to go down maybe a level, go up a level. It just depends on what the data is telling us. Then we go into tier three, and it's very intensive. Almost a lot of times, tier three is like you have a pullout. So you might have a long-term, a substitute at your school. They call them certified teacher tutors, where they pull out kids every day, where you're pulling out kids every day and you're really getting down to the basics. A lot of these kids in elementary don't have phonemic awareness. So they have no idea that sounds can be manipulated in words. They don't know how to rhyme. They don't know how to segment syllables. That is a huge thing for reading, ability to read words. And then, of course, once they can start to read words, then their fluency goes up and then their comprehension comes later. But with math, a lot of times it's, do I know what numbers mean? Do I know place value? Those kinds of things. And so you would target your tier two interventions based on those, what the data is showing you. And that's through your diagnostic. So in CCSD, we do MAPS testing. So we can tell where the breakdown is. There's tons of reports to run that tells us kind of their breakdown Same thing in tier three. It's just a little bit more intensive. You would pull groups, instead of 3 days a week, you would pull them at least 4 days a week. Normally, you would pull groups instead of 6 in tier two, you would maybe do 3 or 4 in tier three. And you would really try and target where are they at and how can I close some of this gap, these gaps. And so that's kind of what that looks like academically. Do you have any questions for me about that part?
The MAPS test, which is given 3 times a year, are there other additional assessments that might be used to look at progress monitoring? I mean, will they be use teacher-made tests or what are not Ed Ready or some of the?
Yeah, so they will, so the diagnostic is given 3 times a year, and that's required by the district. So that's an overall assessment and it's computer adaptive. So that test, it's a universal screener. It's screening students to see what are their knowledge within a band. So in elementary school, they have a band from kindergarten to third grade. I think it's K2 to 5, and then we do 3 to 8. I think we do 6 to 8. And so it adapts them. So if once they answer a question, it'll give them the next question is based on how they answered the question before. So it'll adapt higher, lower, same, depending on it. We can kind of get a overall picture of where the student is at. So once you have that data, you can figure out where the students currently are to start your groups. But then you're going to progress monitoring. We use FastBridge. In the class, we have them practice using dibbles, right? Like an Ames Web
Mhm.
fluency. Now, FastBridge does everything online for you. So you basically, unless you're doing a fluency assessment, the math and stuff, the kid does it online without you having to sit by them. And it graphs for you. So you don't even have to do the graphs anymore
Wow.
like we did in the old days and had to do graphs, which is what they have to do, which I feel like it's a struggle with our teachers who are taking this course to
Yeah.
do some of the graphing. It gets very confusing. And
Yeah.
so you have that. And then of course you have your teacher made tests, your summative assessments that's looking at for elementary, it's like the end of the year, right? All those standards are year-long standards, but you're still looking at how are these students understanding these concepts. They also do like the core phonics inventory. They might do the QSI, which is like a words their way spelling inventory. There's a bunch of different inventories out there where the core phonics is great because it shows you the breakdown of phonemic awareness where students are breaking down with sounds. Because at the end of the day, it's not as important students know letter names as it is to know letter sounds, because knowing the letter
Sounds.
name for us doesn't help us read words at all.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
knowing those sounds, and so there's a lot of different assessment tools that are available specifically in elementary school that can really help.
More so,
Yeah.
I think, in elementary, right?
Oh yeah,
I'm thinking.
definitely. Because it's still new. MTSS is still new. We're one of the few middle schools that have built our program the way we have. And so it is still just getting off the ground. And so we are kind of further ahead. But a lot of my teachers at my school and my admin are from elementary. So we're very much used to the MTSS process. Now, if you look at behavior with the tiers, it's a little bit different. So that behavior with the tiers is where you are going to start just your classroom management plan. What is your school-wide plan? What is your classroom management plan and consequences for classroom management? Are your students, do they get table points? What do they get to follow directions? How are you teaching them those expectations? How are we modeling what standing in line looks like? How are we modeling what sitting at our seats look like? How do we modeling active listening? And so you're really looking at all those tier one things that I can't be a good learner if I can't figure out how to be a good learner with responsibilities, I'm not going to be able to learn. And so really looking at that. And then we kind of break it off, and kids who are still struggling with those high expectations of behavior, they all go into tier two. But before we put them into tier two for us, and this is how we set it up at our school, is we will either do frequency and duration data on one behavior. So they will choose the behavior that's most disruptive, and then they will do 3 10-minute data collection marks of like either marking how often the behavior is occurring within 10 minutes, or the start and end time of a behavior if it needs to be duration data. And so we really look at them doing some baseline data for us. We create an intervention for tier two, and then we keep doing that baseline. That frequency and duration data is our progress monitoring while we're doing the intervention. And that's just what our tier two looks like right now. And then tier three goes into like how do we, this kid needs a behavior plan. Even though they're not a special ed kid, doesn't mean they can't have a behavior plan. It's a different form. It's not as,
Yeah.
it's not as official, right? But
Right.
we do have a plan to make sure that everything is in place because the student needs more intensive intervention. So they might need you to teach them their replacement behavior every 30 minutes, right? And so it gets a little bit more intensive. Whereas tier two, you can set up like a smaller thing, like a check-in, check-out system, where you're giving them those interventions of what does appropriate behavior look like? Here's your reinforcement built in, and then you just track their behavior every week or 2 weeks. It just depends.
Do you have a counselor or CTT come in for tier three, or is the general ed teacher doing the tier three part as well?
So right now for what we are doing for tier three and in the RTI side, we have fundamentals. So kids in secondary, kids don't get their elective. They'll go to an ELA or math
Oh,
fundamentals class where they're getting targeted intervention for 80 minutes every other day.
oh, and it's called fundamentals. Okay, that's new to me. Okay.
Yeah, so that's just what it looks like in secondary. It's like a built-in tier three where I don't have to do it so much in during my general education block like you would
Sure.
in elementary school. And then
Okay.
for tier three for behavior, yes, the counselors are usually involved, the social workers involved, our student success office, where it used to be like the dean's office, but we try not to give it that connotation anymore, where we have like a reset room here. So in that office, kids can go there to reset and reflect. And so that's where some of our tier three would happen is in there.
Okay. And students can move up and down the tiers between the map screenings, right? Depending on the progress monitoring, depending
Yes.
on what they're seeing and with their graphing and how much progress is being made and how stable it is. Okay, that's what I
Yeah, so
thought.
we just look at the data always tells us something very important. So kids are not only getting small group instruction, but they get iReady, which is an online intervention system that a lot of
Okay,
schools are using now. So they
yeah,
get face-to-face 3 times a week, small group, but then they also get every single day up to 40 minutes a week of um of intervention online. And so we don't move kids between the tiers, we only move them by quarter. So every quarter we can look at if a student has, 6 to 8 data points above the line and we feel like they are done in tier two, we'll stop. We can move them back to tier one. Normally moving kids out of tier two, we normally wait till semester when we look at their maps data. But moving kids from tier three to tier two, we do it every quarter. So for us, it's getting kids back their elective. So if we can get them like 6 to 8 data points above where like meeting their goal where they need to be, it's showing the intervention is working now. So then instead of having 80 minutes every other day of fundamentals, they would go back, they would get their elective back, but they would still get those tier two interventions in their regular math or ELA class. So they would still meet 2 or 3 days a week small group. That wouldn't stop happening. So they would stop being in fundamentals, but they would start doing tier two in the classroom. Because when they're in fundamentals, the gen ed ELA and math teacher don't have to worry about the progress monitoring because the fundamentals person does it.
sure,
That general education teacher would have to take that over when they move to tier two. And we do that every quarter so that it gives them an opportunity to get out of tier three if they're working for it
okay,
and try out tier two in the classroom. And so the same thing happens with behavior. We would like, as soon as we see those behaviors decrease, but we normally wait that full 6 to 8 weeks just to make sure that our systems in work, we're create like with behavior, it's almost like we have to create like a habit, right? You have to teach kids how to behave
yeah,
appropriately because a lot of times they've been doing this for a long time. They might have been doing this since they were a toddler and they've gotten away
right,
with it. And now it's a habit. This is how I respond when you give me directions. This is how I respond when you give me work to do. This is how they're all responses. That's what behavior is. It's a response to something. And so it's really just trying to get them into a situation of, no, that's not how we behave. This is how we behave. And it's going to take a while. Sometimes it's 8 to 10 weeks of data just to make sure that the student has been able to generalize their behavior, their appropriate behavior in all settings. And so it takes a
makes
little.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have such a great system. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so clear in listening to how you're running it. A question I wondered, does the whole district have the same benchmarks for moving, for identifying kids at different tiers, or does that vary by school
It
or
does
not really?
vary.
Oh, okay, I wondered.
They're trying to get it more cohesive. I think it's hard because some people have, some people like we had to buy iReady, whereas some schools can't afford that right now. And so I
Oh,
think
yeah.
if they can get a system in place where it's universal, like the MAPS thing is universal. 20 kids below the 21st percentile should be getting tier two intervention, period. That should be happening. But it looks different in every school. And so unfortunately, we're trying to get it to where it's consistent. But it's taken a long time to do that because we've been so focused on, our getting teachers to understand the tier one materials and how to use them. And so I think that has been the focus, but I think we're moving in that direction for sure.
And I've heard 40th percentile. Some of the other teachers, would those be watch kids or 40 seems pretty high?
Yeah, normally between the 21st and 40th percentile, those are more of like your bubble, like you're more like your bubble kids. Like closer to the 40th is like your bubble kids. So those are the kids that are just almost there. Like I would pull those kids in tier one small groups all the time just to make sure that they kept on pace and kept moving.
Okay, that makes sense. Just a couple more questions. So at your school, and really I wanted you to highlight an effective program, and that's what you've been doing. So ideally, what does PD look like for teachers in a program that, has an aim of being consistent and effective and monitored to see where the needs are? So what does PD look like?
So, professional development. So it looks like there's a different, because of where my school is on our journey with MTSS, it's going to look different everywhere. So the district offers professional development. So they offer, if you need to know how to use FastBridge, they offer FastBridge classes with the company. And so they'll offer trainings for that. The district also offers PBIS trainings as well to learn the positive behavior instructional supports, intervention supports that you can use to target behavior. So there's district-wide professional development. And then at my school, what we do is at the beginning of every year, after MAPS is done, we have a data meeting where they have all of their kids' MAP scores and they highlight all the kids that are below the 21st percentile so they can identify who needs tier two instruction. Excuse me. And then we go through which kids are in fundamentals already, and they can cross those kids off because they don't have to worry about progress monitoring them. And then what we do from there is we talk about our RTI expectations. So what does the academic side of MTSS look like for the year? And so we kind of review like small group instruction, what that should look like, what progress monitoring should look like. And then my strategists offer morning sessions that teachers can go to because a lot of my teachers are not new, right? So I don't need to have a ton of professional development
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
specifically with RTI because my teachers aren't new. And so
Okay.
they offer like FastBridge sessions to help you get set up with FastBridge. They offer what I'm doing this year is because we need to improve our small group, the effectiveness of small group instruction. I'm going into every ELA and math class in the next month and I'm observing their small group instruction so that I can get a temperature check on like what is my school doing with small group? What does that look like? Where can I develop professional development? Because everything we do here for the most part is developed by our curriculum committee. High quality professional development targeted to what our school exactly needs, which is the best professional development. And so we look at that. So that's kind of like our RTI system. And we're constantly doing professional development every time we meet with our RTI team,
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Yep.
reviewing the norms, reviewing the purpose of why we're here. We review how proactive it is and that we're not trying to get every kid, eligible for special education services and those kinds of things. And so it's naturally kind of built into our RTI meetings. Now, when we look at PBIS, we started PBIS tier two this year, and we started off by having the teachers write down names of one student that they wanted to target. They were only going to do one student. So they talked about one student. They could group up with other teachers if they all wanted to do the same student. They identified the behavior, defined what the behavior looked like, and went and collect data. Then we had like phase two, where we talked about the data, the baseline data, and what kind of intervention we wanted to start. And then we're going to have, we'll meet with sixth grade by themselves, seventh grade by themselves, and eighth grade by themselves in December, where we kind of look at the data. So we are very early days with our tier two behavior because we want to make sure we don't, if you do too much, then you don't do anything well, is basically what
Right.
happens.
Right.
And so
Yep.
we are trying to roll it out because I have found that a lot of secondary teachers, not all, are very hesitant about the MTSS process. And so
Sure.
until I can get them to see the gold and the power in, effective tier one instruction, effective small groups, effective and consistent interventions and progress monitoring, they're not going to see the gold. They're not going to see the growth, right? Because we want to see
Right.
growth with students. And so once they start to see that, the buy-in gets higher, which is
Oh, that's great.
yeah, which is what you want to see. So we're very small moving with I have a whole behavior tier two lead team, and we meet after school for an hour once a month to plan out what it's going to look like, to check in with teachers, to make sure that they're completing what they're accountable for. But we broke it down so small into chunks just because teachers have so much on their plates and we don't want them to be overwhelmed and we want them to do it well and
Right.
manage it well. And so we have to roll out everything like that. So it's a little bit different than where our RTI is right now, but it's working.
Yeah, it sounds like I love the scaffolded approach, small steps. I mean, as a new teacher, that would be something that would help me feel confident,
Mhm.
learn to be confident in the process. So, April, you have just done such a great job describing your program. I'm so impressed. And I know it took
Oh,
time to get your school where it needs to be, but also for you to learn, what works and what doesn't.
mhm.
And I think you're a model school. Absolutely. I mean,
Thank you
you're
so
very
much.
strong. And I don't know if you want to just end with any tips for new teachers going into schools that would have RTI and PBIS in the MTSS process. Yeah, what suggestion or suggestions do you have?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is just making sure that you are looking at your student data, making sure that you are identifying those students who are struggling and getting that tier two instruction, figuring out what that looks like, reaching out to resources within the district. You can reach out to me. I'm in CCSD. So if you're in CCSD, send me an email and I will get you resources. I am I love what MTSS can do for our schools. I've seen it in my school. I saw it in my elementary school. And so it's just about getting help. And if you need help, as a teacher, you can do it by yourself. You can do it as a teacher on your own if there's not a process. But it's better if you guys work together. But as a teacher, I just want you to make sure that you are analyzing that data and identifying students that need interventions. And then we need to figure out what interventions they need. But it's important to identify those students and working with those parents. Those are the biggest thing. Communicating with parents about your concerns. What are you seeing in the data? Has nothing to do with how your relationship with that child or how that child's behaving at first. What is the data showing you? That is what we need to focus on because then parents are um, a lot more open when
Responsible,
we
yeah.
talk about how wonderful their kids are and what we are seeing in the data, what the data is showing. And so they
Yeah.
are a little bit more willing to listen and take in what we're saying, and they don't feel like they're being accused of doing anything wrong.
Yep,
'Cause
you're giving
parents
them
are,
concrete information
yeah,
that describes their students' learning or their child's learning and behavior.
definitely, definitely.
And I would also add, you said it at the beginning, is to get the small group instruction, to have the belief in and the skill set to run small groups and any
Mhm.
trainings that they can go to and anything we can do to support them. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and just making the time, like making it a priority is huge. Like, whole group instruction is great, but whole group instruction is you. That's it. And so being able to make the time to do it, even if you're just pulling, 10, two groups at 10 minutes a day, and that's where you start. And that time is, we call things sacred time where nothing else can interfere with that. And so figuring out what that looks like for you and starting small, but making it a priority is a big deal.
Sounds doable, right?
Yeah.
Well, April, thank you so much. And I will definitely share this video with you and your students will learn from it as well. And I know my students I already have some prompt questions for them after listening to your sharing with us. So thank you so much. And we really appreciate you and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Have a good afternoon.
Okay. Bye.